Good morning, everyone. Happy Friday, and welcome to my morning forecast. So these are the three pairs for today: three euro pairs: euro yen, euro kiwi, euro dollar. Obviously, yesterday was, I believe, it was a US bank holiday, which is most likely why we've seen this little gap in the DXY just on the daily open, because of there being a little bit less liquidity yesterday. Maybe just caused this slight gap in price, which is fine. But we're still not really got any clear signs just yet. We've turned around, obviously, from this point and started to move down with this little gap, but we haven't really rejected from anywhere. We've taken the lows and started to move off, and we've obviously got this low here to work with, but it might be that price creeps up to fill the gap and comes back down, and it ends up just being kind of a continuation, but not really one that you would trade, and it just then commits again to the upside, because the higher time frame this week, the start of this week, we obviously started to get these nice pushes to the upside. So this could just be a little kind of mini pullback for the next push, but we haven't quite got that yet. So we just need to sit a little bit tight and see if this acts as some kind of base where price just might mess around a little bit and form a little bit of a middle section before the next leg to the upside. So we just need to wait and see what happens with that, because, as I said, we've got this little gap, and there's no clear kind of price is not sat at any good areas yet. So I'm bearing this low in mind, because, as you can see, we've got this push, little continuation, the next push, kind of a pullback that created this base, but price hasn't really tapped into anything above and just started to pull back. So this could act as almost like a kind of two-touch base where price then heads back to the upside. But that's yet to be seen. We just need to wait and see what happens, basically. So with it being Friday as well, like you've heard me talk about before, this is where the weekly candle can come into play, where if we start to get a bit of a push through today into market close tonight, and price ends up closing kind of closer to the top of this weekly wick, then that'll be a really nice sign from this base that we've got a decent, strong weekly close, which could then be the start of a push to the upside, or at least even to this sharp point as a minimum, where price might want to sell back off to the lows, or it just becomes that run. So I will be bearing in mind the weekly close tonight going into market open to see where price actually ends up, because if it starts pushing down and we end up with a long wick above, then it could just mean that price is just hanging around, in this area for a little bit longer, and it might become quite a corrective leg before we get the breakout to the upside. So I'm just sitting tight on this, and as I say, got that low in mind to see if it acts as a bit of a base for the longs. So euro yen, we're sat at this high. We've also got on the lower time frames, we've got a little kind of V-shaped double top that could come into play. There's not really much above. We have this little inflection point here, which it's of importance, but like you heard me talking about yesterday with some of the pairs, with the highest extreme point and the lower point, that price can turn around from where it is. So waiting for it to tap this little area here could just be asking for too much. And that's where you've then got to take a message from the market like we're getting. We've still got an hour and a quarter for this 4 hour to close, but you can see that we're trading at this high. We have this kind of V-shaped double top. This could easily sell off from here. So waiting for the higher above could mean missing out on a great trade that goes sooner. So the 4 hour is looking okay at the moment. Ideally, we get a bit of a better close, but we have got a strong 1 hour candle that's broken back in. So as long as it starts to follow through, we can look on the lower time frames for some kind of continuation play, but that does need to develop first. Ideally, we get the 4-hour close that's strong, and maybe it pushes a little bit lower within the 4-hour candle, and then we get some kind of continuation like this, where we've had the break above, we've had the push back in, we've got the continuation, and now we're playing the next impulse, at least down to this kind of low here as a first inflection point to manage the position in case it acts as a base for a steeper pullback before it drops again. But all I'm waiting for here is to see how the 4-hour closes, and it's not, a big wick. See how the 4-hour closes. That will give us a bit of a 1-hour follow through, and then we can look for the lower time frame continuations to play the sell from this kind of V double top sort of play. So it needs a little bit of time, but it's in a nice area, and we've started to get the 1 hour in. So I'm just going to monitor the 4-hour over the next kind of hour and a bit to see how that closes, and then we'll have a much better answer as to whether we can start to put a little bit more focus on the lower time frames, just to see if we get some structures starting to build. Euro Kiwi, I'm looking at the longs on this. So we've had this 1, 2, 3. It looked like it was going with this strong daily retrace in the right area. We were starting to get a structure form, which you'll see on the 4-hour. We were starting to get this form, and this failed. Now, with this structure and this clear follow through into an obvious continuation pattern that then fails, and we've got this impulse to the upside, that is now why I'm looking for the longs, playing the idea that this has failed to sell, this has failed to sell, and they're almost getting this M-style kind of scoop back into the highs, or at least, into these sort of areas as a minimum. And we're working from an impulse. So we've still got the impulse correction continuation in play. So all I'm looking for here is for this middle section to kind of complete a little bit, just so we've got a bit of this going on. And then once that completes, we've got a little gap to the ray line, which is perfect. And then if price makes it down to this low and we get the gap filled and we get a 1 hour risk entry, then I'll happily look for the 1 hour with, you could probably get him somewhere around 18 pip stop. And just to the first inflection point, you're looking at a 5 to 1, just in that short run to the upside. So there's ample opportunity there to take advantage of the failure of all of these structures from selling off, and having the awareness to see we've come from an impulse, we're starting to stack orders here. We can actually now start to look at getting long and not be fixated in the sells only. So I'm sticking to the 1 hour on this because the 1 hour is, the structure's visible on the 1 hour. It's a nice weighted entry. We just need that little middle section to complete. And then once we've got the two tops, we've got first touch, gap, final touch, and then look for the buyers back into this first inflection point. And it could be a trade that just breaks out to the upside, and then you've taken advantage, as I said, of the failure of structures and not being fixated on looking at the sells only. So this could be a really nice play, and it doesn't need a lot to complete itself to start looking for entries. So that could be a really nice play today. And euro dollar. So I'm kind of neutral on euro dollar at the moment, because you can see we've tagged the highs and we've started to follow through. Price hasn't really turned around from anywhere of importance, and we've started to get a bit of bullishness coming in on the daily, especially with that bullish low test. We're tapping into a kind of inflection point on the left, where this looks a bit like just a larger structure to drop back out, which is what I've got in mind, because that can take over and just sell back to these lows. As you can see, price hasn't really turned around from anywhere, but we've started to get some strong 4-hour candles come in. So this could easily just break back to the upside. And this is more of a kind of bit of a steeper running channel where it breaks out, but at the same time, it can also break to the downside to tag this more kind of key low. So that's why I'm more neutral on this. And similar to Euro Kiwi, it's being able to flip your bias and be aware of both directions. So I'm aware this could break back in, and give us a flag where we can look for the sells managed to the first low, with this being the main target, and look for a risk entry within this structure. But at the same time, we can see that on the 15, we've got a bit of a base going on. So we've got the first touch, we're at the second touch. This could easily form its middle section, come back down for the third touch, and then we've got a similar looking structure to EURJPY, where on the 1 hour, we've got a deliberate structure where we can look for the risk entry for the longs. And at this point, that will be a clear message from the market that, again, we've come from an impulse. We've got an obvious continuation that's not reacted from the higher, and we can now look to get positioned for the buyers and target back up to this next inflection point where you've got a bit of a structure going on, where price sold off from before. So it's kind of a similar play with euro dollar that it is with euro kiwi, in the fact that it's sat in an area where this potential could have been the sell structure that failed. It's reached up. We're not getting a reaction from anywhere on the left, and we're actually potentially building a bullish structure to look to get long. So they're kind of similar plays in the fact that we're playing failures and having the awareness to flip our bias and actually take advantage of the other direction. So that is what I'm looking at on euro dollar, just seeing if we get that bullish structure form. And if we don't, and price just breaks down, we can then look for the continuation underneath this area that's acting as the base for the buyer. We can then look for the structures for the sell and play it down to this next low. So a shorter watch list, and obviously all euro pairs, but some nice pairs this Friday, obviously going into the end of the week and going into the weekend, where we could still get some nice positions shape up. It's just, as I've always said, staying sharp every day of the week and not just on Mondays when it's a fresh week and everyone's ready to go. So we could still get some really nice trades today shape up. I don't believe there's much news to be aware of. Obviously, yesterday it was a US bank holiday. We had some US news in the middle of the week, FOMC. That's all passed, so not too much to worry about from that perspective. And it's now just letting the market do what it's got to do today, give us some of these structures that we're looking for, and then look for the entries at some point if they shape up. So that is all my forecasts done for this week. I posted the euro dollar trade recap yesterday. So if you haven't seen that, go and check that out for my thought process behind why I entered and how I managed. And as always, prepare at the weekend, self-reviews, watch list, and get ready for the final week of June next week. So enjoy your weekend, and I'll catch you all as usual on Monday.